I'm Megan.
I'm CJ.
And I'm Erica.
And this is the Her Podcast.
We are super excited to sit down today with entrepreneur, speaker, and mother of two, Lesley Kelly, aka High Heels and Canola Fields. Yes, we love the name. Lesley's passion for agriculture and advocating for mental health led her to co-found the Do More Ag Foundation, a not-for-profit organization that is championing mental health in agriculture across Canada. As a farm wife myself, I take this topic very seriously and am really excited for you guys to hear everything she has to say. From the shocking stats about mental health, the suicide rates, the rate at which farmers are feeling isolated, how her and her husband created a video to possibly impact one person and instead impacted people all across the world, the way her dad led their farm to really create such a healthy and safe environment to discuss mental health. It's so beautiful and it's so good. You guys are going to want to listen to this one a couple times. There's so many great takeaways. Turn it up.
Yeah, it's hard to explain those nuances.
Well, in terms and just understanding.
Even I don't understand. So, like, my husband gets together with other farmers, and I'm like, I don't know, like equipment. Like, I don't know what some of that stuff is.
Nick tries to teach me. He'll be like, this does this, which does this. And I try to just like let him share with me because I know that's a part of him is he just really wants to like explain. So and I'm like, okay, I don't know, but fine, great. Right. I'm like, this is probably how he feels when I'm like, look at my new outfit. He's like, oh, okay, great.
But you grew up in a farming family, right?
I did.
Yeah.
Yes. And I still like, I never had any aspirations to want to farm or be a farmer. And then.
Word.
Yeah. It's funny how you take a right-hand turn and then come back to the farm with a whole different perspective.
Explain that then. Just share that with us because a lot of our audience probably, you'll be new to them, right? And we want to get to know you a bit more. So just share a bit of your story, like how that happened and what kind of brought you to this space you're in now.
So I grew up in, family farm, grain farm, central Saskatchewan, but I never had, I loved the farm, but I didn't love the farm. Like I was the one who I helped out, but my passions and aspirations growing up were in sports, like being around people in a team atmosphere, being with my friends. And then growing up, I just felt like I had a calling or I wanted to do business stuff. Like I like to be in that team atmosphere and figure out problems. And I love the creative process. So I thought, well, I might have a marketing aspiration. So got my degree in marketing, but then I wanted to be Donald Draper, like from Mad Men. Like I wanted to move to Calgary or Toronto and be in an ad agency and in that type of setting and work with companies and figure out problems and
smoking cigarettes all day
with your hot little receptionist.
I always say that, but like. Minus the extracurricular activities that we did.
Absolutely.
But then I met my husband he didn't farm, like he didn't come from a family farm, but his uncle farmed and he just had a passion for it. So I took my first job out of university and that was working in agriculture. And what I loved about it was I got to work with farmers and hear their stories. So sit down at their kitchen tables and
What did you do?
I worked for Cargill
as
a farm marketing rep. So you went in and you sold crop input products. Yes. So I wasn't really, what I found out was I wasn't good at the selling, but I was really, what I loved was I loved listening and I loved hearing their stories.
I think farmers like to talk. So I think that was probably pretty valuable for you.
I think they've been alone all day and now they're like, listen to this story.
Yeah. And I didn't, I didn't go into or have that ag college background. So I really didn't also know a lot. And so I just love the perspective that they would bring you into their home and share just their passion and their family legacies and their history. And that really just rejuvenated my spirit of, you know what, I really love agriculture and I love this community and the people that are part of it, because we all are like, all farms are unique and different. And I loved learning beyond my farm. So then shortly after, my dad phoned me and he said, do you want to start a company? And I said, well, like what? And he said, I have an idea for using the barley grown on our farm. And I would really love to have a value add and bring that to our farm. And I thought, yes, that's fantastic. So didn't know anything. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I created this snack food company, and I got to work with scientists and marketers and label people and be part of that process. And it was so great to have our family involved. Like, we would sit down in front of the TV and watch shows and slap on labels, and we would go to craft shows and, you know, put on our hair nets and make the product right here in Saskatoon, and then sell them to people that didn't, you know, sometimes that was their first communication or conversation with farmers.
Well, farm to table.
Yeah.
Really, right?
And this was like 15 years ago. So I really enjoyed that and sharing our story and why we loved farming and why we did the things that we did. So then that morphed into creating High Heels and canola fields and going across Canada and sharing our story, which then morphed into hearing the struggles behind it. So, and then starting a not-for-profit that's all around mental health. So yeah, I've had like these little bits of, well, I don't know much about that, but I'm going to try, which has led me into some really cool avenues. So, yeah, I've learned a lot. It's been a really cool journey.
You're a huge advocate, right? And so I'm curious because you said you're talking about mental health and farming. You're like, through hearing these stories, we started this program and this nonprofit. I'm curious on maybe what people don't know about the farming industry. And again, as a farm wife and as someone who's heavily invested in the ag industry myself, I think even sometimes I don't quite know everything. Because I'm not the physical farmer in my family. So I'm curious if you can speak to maybe what you were hearing or what people don't know about the ag industry in terms of mental health.
And there's been a lot that I didn't know growing up. So when it came to farm stress, I remember sitting around our kitchen table and there was always so much conversation going on, but the times where there was no talking and you could just feel that stress, you knew something was going on. But as kids or teenagers, we didn't know how to talk about mental health. We didn't know, like, hey, Dad, is something bothering you? Like, we didn't know it was okay to share that stuff. And I saw my family go through some really hard times where we didn't know much about mental illness or those mental health challenges, and we didn't know it was okay to talk about those things. And my husband has been a huge he's taught me so much when it came to that, because he lives with anxiety and panic attacks. My dad, when he battled cancer, lived with anxiety and depression. My little sister lives with borderline personality disorder. My brother lives with PTSD and anxiety, and during those times we didn't know how to talk about it and felt that we couldn't. So when it comes to in agriculture, one of our biggest aha moments was when my husband and I thought, we know we aren't alone in this. We know that this farm stress is something that we all have in common, because there's weather challenges, there's market challenges. And we did a live video. But before we did the live video, we thought, okay, well, let's Google farmer sharing mental health story. And nothing came up. We're like, why aren't people talking about this? And so we thought, well, there could be some risks. What is our community going to think? Are we going to lose friends? And then we thought, well, we have operating lines of credit. Would that impact, what the bank says? Could that impact our business? Are we going to be high risk for insurance? And then what really was our aha moment of why we might not talk about it is some of our land is for rent, or we rent land. And would people go to our landlords and tell them that, the Kelly's over there. They're a little bit crazy. Right. And then our rented land be gone. And so that was our aha moment as to...
And can I just speak to, like, that is a very real thing.
It is a very real thing.
In our own community, we have very real, like, this is how you act around older farmers. And not that anyone's acting, but, you know, this is... You will have people who choose to not rent to you based on things, you know, and
which affects your livelihood.
Which affects your livelihood. These very real fears of how will this impact us when you speak out about things is very real.
It is. And when it's mental health, like there's the personal aspects of what are people going to think? Are we going to lose friends? Or how will this impact me personally? That fear. But also when it comes to farming, it's the fear of the, you know, on our farm, we're the 5th and 6th generation farms.
Wow.
And that rests on our shoulders. And if we, you know, if this is something that people see differently, will that impact our business? And then we lose the farm. So that was our aha moment as to, wow, in agriculture, we have barriers. We have the stigma that impacts us, and we don't feel that we can share. And if we do share, we don't know where to go. And it's hard to access those resources. So that was the biggest aha moment as to, let's do this video. And if it just helps one person.
So what is the video you're referring to?
We did a video, this live video in our kitchen table. My husband shared him living with anxiety and that farm stress and the things that he has done through years of adding some tools to his toolkit, and then just sharing that it's okay and that there is hope and help out there. And I shared that I had postpartum depression. And when we were done that video, holy smokies, like our goal was, you know, if one person just watched and it helped them, but it was viewed hundreds of thousands of times. We got so many messages, like as soon as it was done, just the DMs lit up and the text messages and the emails and the phone calls, and people from in and outside of agriculture, across Canada, but then also the world. Like we were getting messages from farmers in Ireland and the Netherlands and New Zealand and Australia saying, you know, this is the time, like we need to start talking about this. And we have similar stories. We had similar struggles, or I saw my spouse go through that. I didn't know what to do, or this is what's helped me. So we realized that there are, like, our farmers and our agriculture community go through really hard times, and we need more support, and we need to break down those barriers to get the help that so many of us deserve and need.
Well, and I really like the term. I've never heard the term farm stress before.
Yeah, I thought
but
that too.
I really, really like that term. And I'm like, for someone listening who isn't connected to the farming community, what are some of those examples?
Some examples would be, so within agriculture, there's a lot of unique stressors that are outside of our control that might be different than those who may work a 9 to 5 job. So lots of things are outside of our control, like the markets. We sell our products into the commodity markets, and we don't get a set, like we get set prices. We would love to sell for more. Or when a hailstorm comes through and you watch your crop just be completely demolished. And there are other factors, like we work with our family and love our family, but we...
I didn't mean it like that. I just meant, like, we always have to say that kind of thing, like love.
We love our family.
Yeah.
That's a dynamic, though.
It is a dynamic.
Yeah.
So there's great things, but then there's also some stressors and challenges that come with that, where you're working with different generations and different styles, and you can't really fire your spouse, right? Or fire your sibling. Then what's hard too is, you know, after a long day of work and go to social media, and then you are scrolling and you see people that are sharing, like, you know, animals and agriculture are killing the planet, and agriculture is doing this, and farmers are, you know, spraying chemicals, and those are killing us and causing cancer and this, and that's hard, because it's like, well, that's only one piece to the story of why we do things, and there's such an incredible story that isn't being shared. Our work, the nature of the work that we do, can be a stress. We work long days and long hours. It's
Such
physical.
long.
Yeah.
Often solo.
And often solo.
Yeah.
So we're isolated. I watched my husband be on a combine for 20 hours a day and only get a few hours of sleep because you got to get the crop off in a short amount of time. And then now farms, through the transition of family farms, they are a lot bigger. And
Way bigger.
Way bigger. And when they're bigger, there's more money involved. And so when you watch a crop being decimated by a hailstorm or being stressed through drought, it's not tens of thousands of dollars, it's sometimes millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And then you hear, or you have the stress of, the weight of the farm is on my shoulders, and something that my dad and grandfather built, and I don't want to be the person that loses this farm. And so and some of those things all come at once, because one thing, a weather storm or weather factors, then play into finance stress and relationship stress. And so it can be all at once, many challenges, unique stressors that many outside of agriculture might not know when they're driving across Saskatchewan and just see beautiful canola fields. So lots of behind the scenes where it can and does impact our mental health.
I love that you touched on the social media piece, because I'm like, I get like really upset with fear marketing and anything that isn't accurate when it comes to, when things say, I don't care, I'm going to say like non-GMO, and it's like, well, none of that's GMO, or like anything like that. Like I watch my farmer who gets really stressed by it and bothered by it, because again, I think what you're speaking to is like really hard work, and then almost feeling like, now I'm beat up for it a little bit, right? And so I love that you hit on that, because I think that's an important piece that people don't realize. And I think sometimes even in our own community, and Saskatoon is small, but I'm like so removed from a field that's within 10 minutes of driving outside of the city. You're going to see a farmer. And so sometimes I know that's a frustration for me, is really understanding what's going on and not looking at the whole story, you said, right?
I had an instance. So the reason why I created High Heels and Canola Fields was...
Which is your Instagram account. I'm just going to point that out.
Yeah. We were selling our snack food in downtown Vancouver.
Ooh.
And some people were so excited because they're like, you're a farmer from Saskatchewan and this is your product, and such positive reception. But then there were a few individuals that would come up and they would, wasn't too sure about barley and would ask questions. And then they would ask like, well, do you use chemicals? And we would say, well, yes, and here's why. And we wouldn't be able to even answer the question, because then we were called some really bad names, or some would just then walk away. They had a perception of, this is the one type of farm that you can be, and if you're outside of that, then you're bad. And I'm like, for me, there's no right or wrong way, or good versus bad. It's like you need all different types of farms and all different types of farmers to make the industry really work. And there was an individual, so I was very pregnant at this show, and a hot, sweaty mess, very hormonal. And she came up to me and she said, well, do you spray chemicals? And I said, yes. And she looked at my belly and she said, well, you're a bad mom. And I took that such to heart, because we were told we would never be able to have kids, and to be labeled on a decision that she only heard or would know one little piece to a very big puzzle, and be called such a hard thing, like a very negative thing. So I went back to the hotel room that night and cried and said, snack food isn't for me, or what are we doing? You go through that hard cycle, but then I realized, I don't want, like when she said you're a bad mom, she had such fear in her eyes. And I thought, from what she's being fed or the stories that she's being told, I don't want someone to go to the grocery store and fear their food, because all of our food is safe. And if I could help share just that other side of the story, how I love this farm life, and these are the decisions that go into it, and one decision impacts this, and the family portion of it too. If I can create a positive aspect out of that, then I can help play a part in changing that narrative. So that's where High Heels and Canola Fields started.
Are you in the market to sell a home, buy a home, or maybe both? Listen, it can be a super stressful process, but it doesn't have to be. Lesley Kelly is an award-winning Saskatoon realtor who prides herself in being your one-stop shop for both buying and selling, and is passionate about helping her clients find their forever home. Guys, it shows when you meet her. With over 12 years in the industry and a 98% list-to-sale ratio, Lesley finds the best individual approach and plan for her clients, including extensive and personalized marketing strategies, because we all know that is more important now than ever. Along with her husband and partner, Kyle Berneski, Lesley is licensed in residential, commercial, and farm, so she literally has you covered no matter what real estate area you need. And she has built solid and long-standing relationships within the industry, so she can dial up the best lawyers, mortgage brokers, appraisers, and contractors for you. So if you want a driven, hardworking, and connected agent who will go above and beyond for you, this is a no-brainer, you guys. Get in touch with Lesley. You will find her at Realty Executive Saskatoon, on socials at Lesley Cossette, that's at LACEYCOSSETTE, and online at laceycossette.com. Don't worry, friends, all the info is linked for you right in the show notes.
I think transitioning back to mental health.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And talking about just like mental health in rural areas. I would love to know how growing up in a rural area, being located in a rural area, being able to access, support in a rural area, like how does that piece play into mental health and how hard it can be?
Yeah. So, a big question. And I didn't, 10, 15 years ago, we didn't know anything about mental health. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't know what mental wellness was, mental illness, mental health struggles, what our stressors were. Like, we just didn't know how to talk or communicate about it. So in rural areas, there's that stigma that you might not feel that you can share, and then you might not know where to go. Access to getting mental health professional help is quite a challenge. I can't, like in harvest, at times, get off the combine and then drive 4 hours to get an appointment. But over the course of 5-7 years, even since the onset of Do More and through COVID, like COVID really shed light into the importance of taking care of ourselves and mental health. We are seeing more resources through virtual and through other avenues, through our community support. I'm seeing more peer supports become available. And then I'm also seeing us move the needle where when we started Do More, conversations on social media or online about mental health weren't being had. Like I remember going to an event and someone coming up to me and saying, there's a time and place to talk about mental health, and this is not the time or place.
And you were like, do you want to tell me how you're feeling?
Yes. So
flip that back on you.
Tell me more, right? Or at events like mental health wasn't part of the agenda. Business pieces were, and agronomy pieces, marketing pieces were, but mental health was just something we did not talk about. And now, holy smokies, you're seeing mental health being part of almost every event. There are more organizations coming on board. There's more programs, more workshops, more access. So we've got a long ways to go, but we are moving the needle needle in terms of awareness and our community talking about it. So to me, those are two really important pieces to then, because if we're doing those two, then more access and more resources are going to become more readily available to not only just our farmers, but our community, like those who support farmers, those who are part of our communities in other aspects too, because the supporters need support too. So it's coming, and we're moving the needle in a really good way in a short time frame too.
So I'm curious if you can share any kind of stats or anything with mental health in the agriculture. Like,
yeah, I think
the numbers
people
are like,
love to hear something tangible that they can kind of like latch onto and resonate with, right? Like, so
Yes.
when you share a statistic, I think we'll be shocked, right? But I think it's important that we're shocked.
We had an inclination that our farmers were going through hard times. We had no idea it was where it was at. So in Canada, only 2% of us farm. And of that 2%, over 60% of us struggle with anxiety.
Wow.
35% of us live with depression. 75% of us live with high stress, overwhelming stress. We know what prolonged overwhelming stress does is you go on the verge of burnout, or you have mental health or physical struggles. So knowing those, hearing those stats, and the one stat that really was the gut punch was 40% of our farmers would not feel that they could get help. They did not feel confident or be able to go to a mental health professional because of what people might think. So that to me was, we are struggling. Over half of us are struggling with some sort of illness or a challenge, and we feel that we can't go and get help. So to me, that was the big aha moment of, I'm genuinely concerned for our farming community. But knowing now that we're having those conversations and there are supports coming and are available, it gives me a lot of hope that we will move the needle. And I would say the biggest reason that I share is knowing that our farmers right now are struggling. But I've got two little farmers at home, 7 and 10-year-old boys that my hope and my goal is, my husband and I and my family went through a time where we didn't feel that we could talk about it, or there was that community. And my hope and my dream and my passion and my goal is that if my kids farm, it's not if they'll go through hard times, it's when, because they will go through hard times. And I want them to know and feel and understand that there is that community around them, and that there is help, and that it will be okay. Very different than what we went through when we were going through those hard times.
I mean, again, I don't know the statistic at all, and I should know. Maybe I've kind of like blocked it from, maybe because it's so close to home, but I've heard before the suicide rate in farming is quite high. And that, I mean, I'm sure that has to do with the stress and the isolation. And again, I can only speak to my experience in farming, but I think our farmers, I mean, it's changing, but a high majority of men who probably already feel like they're a man, so they can't ask for help. And now they feel weak. And now they really can't ask for help because they're supposed to shoulder all of this dynamic by themselves. And I would imagine it just spirals, right? And it just turns into just hopelessness that they're experiencing.
Yeah, I saw it. We lived through it where, so my husband, Matt, he has lived with his anxiety. And he said now, looking back, likely his whole life, but being in another profession or occupation, that anxiety, he was able to, it fueled him. But then changed to, come into my family farm. So he's trying to figure out relationships with my dad and then my brother. And then we were hit with so much rain where we lost acres. We were living in Regina. So, and the farm being at Watrous, he was commuting 4 hours. He was away from his small family, living in a camper. He started to suffer from panic attacks, and I didn't know, because being in Regina, I was very focused on the kids and didn't see those day-to-day changes that he was going through. But there was a moment where I came home from work and he was in the living room and full-on panic attack. And I didn't know what was happening. He didn't really know because he'd only gone through about a couple at that time. I thought he was dying. It was the most horrible thing to watch your person go through something like that. And he, after that, the only thing I could think of doing in that moment was to hug him really tight and get him to focus on my breath. And then I laid him on the floor, took off his shirt to able to cool him down. And once that was over, we had a very good conversation, heart to heart, as to I didn't know or I didn't understand. And I asked him, like, well, what do you need? What can I do? And he said, I don't know what I need. So we started at the basics, but I asked, like, why didn't you tell me? And he said, he said that I was less than. Mm-hmm. I felt I wasn't a good enough farmer because it was just, he said he was on that roller coaster and he couldn't get off because he wasn't sleeping, he wasn't eating. And then that would make his anxiety worse. And he said, I felt I wasn't being a very good dad. I felt I wasn't being a very good husband. I felt I wasn't being a very good business partner. I felt I wasn't being a very good farmer. And then that just kept on fueling or going around in that circle. And I totally can get it because in those moments of struggle, there's lots of shame. Mm-hmm. And he thought, like, why can't I do this anymore? I should be able to do this. So it was one of the hardest moments, and I can only imagine others going through that similar situation when they might not have that supporter, that cheerleader. And our farmers stats share that farmers are 2 to 5 times more likely to die by suicide than the rest of the population because they might not have those supports around them in those really hard moments.
Well, and I think in those seasons of, like seeding and harvest, and when they're working so hard, like the amount of hours, like I think we don't realize like how much they're missing out on like what we take for granted as the basics, right? Like a solid night's sleep. Mm-hmm. Like, can you imagine? I can't, but like, you talking about working 20 hours every day to get stuff off the field and only sleeping for 4. And, I also think about like a lot of farmers that are younger and maybe don't have a family yet. And so like they're out in a field. How are they buying food? How are they getting groceries for themselves? That's something I've seen is like town is far away. The city is far away. I don't get days off during the week, or I get one day off and then the store is closed on that day. Like, how am I supposed to get myself groceries to feed myself, And it's like those basics of like sleep, nutrition, hydration.
Yes. Yeah.
Water. You know what I mean? That also just like contributes to this.
And then you're told, you're going through a hard time. Well, put your head down and work through it.
Yeah.
Because you're not supposed to feel that or have those hard times because you are a farmer. You are hard and tough and resilient. And I get it because that's what's got us through some really hard and difficult times. But that's what my husband thought. Well, before he did put his head down and he worked through it, and he kept wondering, like, I'm doing that. Why isn't this working? But that made his anxiety worse.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah. I'm like, mental health is hard to begin with, no matter what, right? But when you add it into a new layer of a farming, job description, like it just elevates it, right? Mm-hmm. And I've seen it in my own family's life of where it takes it from where it could be here, where you have more controllables that you can, more tools in your tool belt that you're able to access. But with farming, you just face really new challenges.
Well, and I think the time piece is really important and you kind of touched on that with like the drought, you're in a combine. And I mean, I lovingly tease my husband that our combines don't turn off. Right. I always say, well, ours don't turn off. Yours turn off. Right. Me and my farm friends, we make little jokes to each other about that. But really, like, I think you put all this stuff on, you put all these layers, and now the rain's coming. Mm-hmm. So not only do I maybe recognize I'm in a mental state that is not okay, I'm not doing fine, things aren't good, but the rain is coming. So I better get this crop off. And And like, I've learned that when my husband says to me now, like, I can't do that, I don't have time, that is my role to go, okay. Like, to that, we talked about the stress and like the stress of a storm is coming or whatever else, and it's like, now you have to just go. Like, I've shared on my Instagram before the cute little Instagram videos of me and Nick, doing fun stuff in the field. And then there's the moments when I set up my tripod, he runs up and grabs supper and is like, I can't. Like, that storm is coming right now and I need to spray. And I think that level of stress on anybody, to be on time constraint stresses like that, would have me in a tizzy. And now you're adding all these different layers.
You're just constantly working against the clock.
A clock you don't control.
A clock you don't control, things you don't control. We could have planted one day later, or maybe we should have waited and the frost came. These things that just happen. And I think the other piece that's been, I don't know, and this is a great conversation for Nick and I to have, but I'm like, Nick misses out on a lot of fun stuff because of farming, because he works in the summer. And so we miss out on a lot of stuff, which I'm sure, like, he'll sometimes say, like, it'd be fun if I could go and do that. But the land, all of this stuff, like, will come first in our lives. And so we've had to add tools into our life about mental health. And I'll say, like, we found someone who he can do things through a phone. Because I'm like, you can sit in a tractor, because you're just sitting listening to a podcast and you're going to have a conversation with someone. And these are some of the things we need to be sharing and
advocating.
Advocating. Be like, you're right, you can't go to the city. Like, that's valid, and we need to stop being like, yes, you can. It's like, no, they can't. And even if they physically can turn off the tractor and physically get in the car and drive, they can't. Like, that's the thing for me that I've had to learn is he can't. Doesn't matter, right?
I'm so curious because you spoke about how you and your husband did the live and where he opened up about what he was struggling with. And I'm curious how you guys together went from him having the panic attack on the floor to getting to that place where he was willing and ready to tell his story in front of a camera, and knowing that it might go to 100 people, but it actually went to hundreds of thousands of people.
Heyo, it's CJ here. Lately, I've been looking to incorporate more color into my wardrobe. Thank you, Erica. Seriously, Erica has been sending me links to the cutest pastel colored clothes to check out this spring. And one of the colors specifically I've been leaning into and embracing, drum roll please, is more pink. Because hello branding. One of the pieces I'm eyeing up right now is this super cute Queen of Hearts crew neck from L'Exquisite Clothing. It's got my girl Dolly on it. It's bright pink and so fun. Personally, I like fashion that is both functional and easy to wear. So a cute oversized crew neck for me is chef's kiss. Recently, I was at a weekend retreat where I had the pleasure of meeting Andrea, the owner of L'Exquisite Clothing. She was so kind and had impeccable style. So when I learned she owned a clothing boutique, it all made perfect sense. If you've never heard of L'Exquisite Clothing, I'm going to introduce you. They're an online fashion boutique, which, ladies, that means no matter where you're listening from right now, you can shop all their pretty pieces online. And they were kind enough to give our listeners a discount code. Use the code HER15 to save 15% off your order. That's HER 15 to save 15% off your order. P.S. Don't worry, if you're driving right now or super busy, we've got you. We've linked the website l'exquisite.ca and put the discount code HER15 to save 15% off your purchase in the show notes. Plus, I need to tell you they have free shipping on all orders over $75. Make sure you check them out online and follow them on Instagram to see all their new arrivals. At L'Exquisite Clothing, that's LUXQUISITE Clothing. Links in the show notes, friends. Happy shopping.
When we decided to do the live video, what got him excited was, if he could help one other farmer. And there was like this sparkle in his eye. And what he and I have realized is by sharing, because we share a lot now about our mental health story, it's very therapeutic. it's been part of our therapy journey, is just sharing our story and and telling what we've been through and the things that have helped us, and know that it could plant a seed of support or encouragement or love and hope to someone else. And that for him has been a driving force for him to champion and support me and in all the Do More Egg stuff and speaking and just trying to help other farmers, because we don't want someone to go through what we went through and in feeling that there wasn't hope or there wasn't help or you couldn't share. So that was what really propelled him to go from one of the worst days to now some of his best days.
After that happened and you kind of discussed things, was like therapy something that he was like, okay, I'm willing to try? Like there were I'm interested in those tools and how you navigated walking alongside your husband in those instances. Yeah.
It wasn't a one and done deal. It's been a progression over a decade, where we knew from then on that floor, the tile floor, that we had nowhere to go but up. And we really were part of the journey, know that this is going to be a journey. And now through the things that we've learned about mental health, we can now say that through his anxiety, my postpartum, my sister's borderline personality, all these mental health struggles, it's made us into the unique and special and gifted people that we are. And it's brought our family closer together. So we were really open to the process of, hey, today we're going to try this. And then tomorrow we're going to try this. And this might work today, but it might not work the next day. But we're really open to learning and supporting each other. And I've had amazing leaders on our farm. And I don't think we'd be where we are today if it wasn't for my parents really championing or setting the stage for us to be our best versions and come to the farm table just knowing that we are good enough, and we're all different and unique, and that in itself is special. Where one of the moments that really changed our farm culture was so Matt was suffering with his anxiety. We were all going through our stuff. Really, no one knew on the farm because we were all coming together with my brother from Manitoba, us from Alberta, and we sat on the deck one day. It was a business meeting, air quotes, but we really didn't talk about anything business. We just shared behind the scenes, and we really started to learn about who we were and what we were going through, because my parents were transitioning off the farm. They had lots of stress as to what does the future entail, what does the farm look like, what does retirement look like, and a change of identity. My brother coming from Manitoba, living with PTSD and anxiety, I didn't really understand that being in a vehicle is quite a hard challenge for him, because he saw a very horrific accident, and just knowing that, or then hearing he doesn't sleep well when he's having those attacks, and that's why he comes to the farm late. Because before I would say, well, he's not putting in his time, he's coming to the farm late, and now it's like, oh, he's not sleeping, and he does deserve to be able to have a break and come to the farm at 10, whatever works for you, because we deserve to be healthy and happy. And then we shared our stories. And my dad one day said, kids, if, out of the 40 or so crops that I've grown, if there's one thing that I've learned out of all my farming career, and he said, if we want to be successful, it isn't about how much land we have or the type of equipment we drive. It's about how we take care of each other and ourselves. And that really brought us all together as to that is what will define our success, is each other. And how can we help take care of each other and ourselves? And we really put mental health as a priority on the farm. And now we talk about mental health every day. Like, we learn to really understand the language and how to check in and how to, support each other. I thought I was a really good supporter until I always found like my conversations with Matt would always take a right-hand turn, and we would leave, frustrated. And I thought, well, what is it I'm doing that I'm not I'm not understanding. And I am a fixer, solver, and saver. And I would say, try this or do this or why don't you do that? And he was left being frustrated. And now I realize that what he needed was just someone to listen versus, try to solve it in a day. And one of my moments of really trying to understand his anxiety was, I would think of, well, just, go and have a nap, just get 2 hours of sleep, but hard to shut it off. And so after not sleeping all night, in the morning, he came to me and he had an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, just a white piece of paper. And there was nothing white on that paper left. And all he did was just write down his thoughts. He doodled, really got what he was feeling out, and journaling really helped. And he showed me that piece of paper, and it was like a visual representation of what he was feeling and what he was going through. And to me, that was like the aha moment of really understanding his anxiety and what a day in the life is like for him. So small changes of understanding our mental health, where we were at, incorporating it into our conversations. Like every morning we have a check-in as to what's your stress level at 1 to 10. Okay, you're at a 10. What does that look like? How can I help? Oh, you're at a 10. Okay, so maybe I'll do this for you. Does that work? So it's opened up such a great organic dialogue about our mental health, and then learning all about what support and what we can do for each other in those hard days, but also in those good days too. So small changes over the past 10 years has really helped our farm and our family.
Well, I think something people take for granted is just, and this may not be everyone, and again, I'm not in anyone's shoes, but just from what I've witnessed from the outside with people in my own life, is that a lot of them just need to get it out. Mm-hmm. And especially men, they haven't found an outlet of how to do that. So whether that be journaling or like a safe listening ear, you know what I mean? I think it's important for them to speak it and to get it out. And that even just like sheds light and weight for them. And they have so much weight that they carry, right? And so I'm like, anything that like lightens that load is so important.
Yeah. We always, we say name it to tame it. So when we say our number, even like when you say, oh, my stress is at a 7. Okay, well, even that, by naming it and knowing we were at that, it's like, well, maybe I'm a 6 now. Like it's gone down a little bit.
I've had to get really good at asking Nick, because I'm a fixer and I'm a pivoter, and I'm like, we're here now. Like I'm kind of a little like, well, we're here now, so now what do we do? Like we can't look back. Like now we're here. And I've had to get really in tune with saying, do you want me to give you a suggestion and a solution, or do you just really want me to listen? And I mean, that sweet man, he usually just like looks at me and I'm like, I'll just listen. Okay, you go ahead. Right. And I'm like this, because I'm just like, that's what you need to do. Like, I know, but I think it's like so important to just let people speak.
Yes.
And to just meet them where they're at. And I think we really have lost, and we talked about this on that grief episode with Lisa Gregg, is we've really lost, like most of the time we're trying to move the needle because of our discomfort levels, and we're not really considering them. And I've been in situations before where I'm like, I really just need to cry and feel this, and I want to for a day hate this, and tomorrow I'll feel better, but I don't need solutions right now. And I think we forget that our men and our farmers and our female farmers might also just be like, I just today want to like hate the rain.
Oh yes.
And I don't want to talk about something. And I think even in farming, a lot of times there's not solutions for things too. So it's like, listen to your farmers, listen to what they're saying. Right?
Yeah.
What's one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to mental health in the agriculture industry?
Oh, geez. Like I would say that we're too tough to talk about it, or just the notion of strength. Like through my dad and my husband and my brother have redefined what strength is, and it's from here. But the notion that we're too tough to feel or to struggle. And it's like we're all humans, and we go through some really hard times in farming, and we aren't supposed to do it alone. We might farm alone, but we need that team now around us, whether it's accountants, bankers, a cheerleader, to be there. So I would say that would be the biggest one that comes to mind when it comes to mental health.
No, that's good. How do you think that others outside of the farming community, or inside the farming community, like, someone who's farming, a friend, a family member, can come alongside and be a support?
I think, to go back to what you said, to know how to support, and to know the difference between that emotional support and that practical support. The best thing that you can do is to check in. And I think what I've seen in our community is we've changed the language of mental health, of, checking in of like, how are you doing? You seem really down right now. And then, hey, I'm proud of you. I believe you. I believe what you're going through. And that sounds really hard. That sounds really difficult versus, well, at least it's not this, or man up, or boys don't cry, or, it could be worse. And I get that. It absolutely can. But let's acknowledge that it's okay to feel that. And it's okay to feel many different things. And to be there in those hard times for each other, that having that community around you is such a life-saving and life-changing thing. Like the biggest, one of my aha moments when it came to how important these conversations are, or even listening when you feel like you might not be doing anything, but just by being there for someone is life-saving. So I was at an event. It was one of our first, I would say, sessions about mental health, or a panel. And as we were sharing, there was a farmer at the back, and he was visibly upset. He had his head down, and very emotional as we were sharing for that hour. And after everyone had left, he stuck around, and he came up to myself afterwards, and he said, I'd like to thank you. And I said, well, why? And he said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to talk to my wife. You just saved my life. Mm-hmm. He didn't share his story. I don't know his story, but by just being in that room and knowing that he wasn't alone, that his neighbors felt the same, his neighbors had gone through the same, and listening. Life-saving, life-changing for me, because I realize the impact that it can have through these conversations. One conversation of just checking in or just asking the question, that farmer might not open up in that moment, but it might plant the seed later on where they feel confident or know, hey, I might then be able to talk to this person, or I know that there's a phone number I can call. So planting these little seeds can have such amazing, profound impacts in our communities.
We often think we're alone in our feelings. I think we really do. And I think we don't, weirdly enough, we actually think no one else is going through it. I think a lot of the time in our situations, we think no one else is going through this. And the truth is, a lot of us are going through it, and a lot of us have our stuff going on. And so there's so much power in what you just said, right? Of really just getting down to the nitty gritty and going, I've been there. I know, here's the hope at the other side of it. You actually don't have to carry this all, and giving them the permission to maybe acknowledge those feelings. I think you're doing that for people.
Mm-hmm. It's so important. And I had such amazing, heartfelt, humbling experiences in this. And another one was, same at the onset, where after we were done sharing, an older farmer had gotten up, and I instantly thought, we're going to get blasted. We're going to get told to get off the stage and to not talk about this. And it was the opposite, where this older farmer held up all of his fingers, and he said, I don't have enough fingers on my hand to count the amount of farmers that I've lost in my community due to suicide. And it's about damn time we start talking about this. And you could see the whole room just go like the huge weight lifted off their shoulders just by him saying it's okay that we talk about it, because we're all human. We all go through this.
That is so powerful. Wow. I know we're coming to the end of our time here, which always goes too fast. But I would love if you could just quickly touch on what it is you do with the Do More Foundation.
Do More Egg.
Do More Egg, sorry, Foundation.
So myself, I'm a co-founder. We started it 5 years ago, and our whole essence of being is to champion the mental health for all of our Canadian farmers and our farm families. And we do that by creating awareness about mental health and mental illness. And then our second one is creating community, so we can feel that we can have these conversations and talk about mental health. And then the third focus is building and bringing further resources to our rural communities. So we're doing that across Canada, and for the past 5 years we've helped train and support thousands of farmers and their families, and building that awareness and knowledge and bringing those tools to their farm.
Such important work. Wow.
Thank you for what you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for what you do.
Wow.
Yeah, and for bringing that awareness.
You're touching a lot of people's lives, and you're really making a difference in so many communities.
Well, I always think if it helped one person, and if my boys are part of this farming community, I hope that they have helped too.
Amazing. Well, we always like to close off our interviews by asking our guest one question.
Yes.
And I have a feeling you have many pieces that you could give us, but I'd love if you could share with us what is the best piece of advice that you have ever been given.
The best piece of advice I've ever been given was my dad. And so throughout my life, he said this one sentence, and I really didn't know what it meant until he passed away. And so the story that he shared was, or the line is, Lesley, you are always stronger than you know. And it first started when I remember when I was 7, and I was running outside with my flip-flops, and I stepped on a nail, and the nail went right through the thong or my flip-flop and right through my foot. And I remember I cried. He held my hand all the way to town, and I cried. And as we were going to the hospital, he said, "Your foot is going to hurt, Lesley, but you're stronger than you realize." And then when I went through my first heartache as a teenager, I remember my dad was the first person that I went to, and I cried on his shoulder, and he said, "Your heart's going to hurt, Lesley, but you're stronger than you realize." And that
might have got me crying for the first time.
When I first, because I'm not equipmentally inclined, so I'm not very good running a piece of equipment, and the farm needed help, so I was on the grain cart for the first time, and I didn't do a very good job. And I came back to the farm, and my dad was hanging around, and he said, "Well, how did it go?" And I said, "Well, not very good." And he said, "Lesley, your confidence is going to hurt, but you're stronger than you know." And then, sorry, we're all right there with you. When we got the news that, so he battled cancer, and we got the news he only had a couple days left with us. We were sitting in his hotel or his hospital room, and he got the news, and he looked out the window, and he looked back, and he was crying, and I was crying. And he said, "Lesley, your heart's going to hurt, but you're stronger than you know." So he, to me in that moment, I realized that strength is more than just physical, and he redefined what strength is. And I always share with people through mental health struggles, physical struggles, anything that they're going through, is just to always remember that you are stronger than you know, and you will get through it. So I carry his advice to heart and live it every day. I say it to myself every day when I get up and wake up, and I say it to my kids, you're stronger than you know. Realize your full potential, because your best will always be good enough.
Wow.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
You got me, Lesley. That's beautiful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us. Wow. For our listeners who are just meeting you, can you tell them where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm easy to find at High Heels and Canola Fields across social media, or highheelsandcanolafields.com, and all the mental health resources in agriculture can be found at domore.ag.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us today. What a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to share.
We're so happy that you came.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.
Bye. Bye.